Hello friends, welcome back to the James Lawrence Allcott channel. It was one of the craziest game weeks of the season so far. Some incredible scenes across the Premier League with some shockers chucked in there as well as excellent performances. And this week we're going big and we're going in on the teams that are struggling and the teams that are thriving right now and the real reasons as to why they are good or bad. If you are new to the channel, do me a favour. If you enjoyed this video by the end of it, hit the like button. Right, let's start off with the Manchester derby. Manchester United 2-1 winners. The XG 1.72 to Man United. A lot of people pointed that out to me, and fair enough. Because, you know, Man City had control. But what is control these days? Man United had an XG of... Man City had an XG of 0.65. So, who is to blame for what's going on at Man City? I think we all expected them to just walk it or to certainly just gently bring Arsenal in. But it ain't happening right now for Man City, who look slow, ponderous, lacking zip. Now, there are a few different questions that could be asked from Manchester City after this match, some of which are tactically related and some of them are towards the players. But first, we need to praise Man United and how they set up because it was super organised. I did a whole reaction talking about the offside, so if you want to go check out that reaction, I dive into that and, yeah. Spoiler alert, it wasn't off. It wasn't a goal. It was offside, okay? But that flat back four, it was compact at crucial periods, and the double pivot of Casemiro and Fred only solidified things further with that little bit more impetus going forward and a clear plan, but proactive defending. I think that's what I was so impressed about. Fred, dead redemption, huh? Fred, he was crucial here. He played an integral role in this side, and Ten Hag deserves so much credit for this, for two reasons. First of all, by making those important signings such as Eriksen and Casemiro, it's allowed him to take Fred out of the firing line, which has almost given him that breather, or certainly it's kept him away from the spotlight. And so when he does come in, it's a bit part, but you're not expecting too much, which allows him to thrive under those expectations. And look, he's fresh, isn't he? He's rejuvenated these days. And that gives him the possibility of becoming a real asset to this squad. It was something that a lot of people said. I think I saw Stephen Howson saying it at one point. He said, look, if Fred and McTominay are squad players, we've got ourselves a good squad. And maybe they've got exactly that right now. Because in Casemiro and Eriksen, I think you've just got two very wily, smart players who can deal with the instructions that are coming from Ten Hag, but also be good under pressure in those difficult moments in those massive games. The second reason Fred and Ten Hag need to be praised is how spot on they got this tactically, because I really like the position Fred took up in negating that half space, but also negating De Bruyne, which was his main task. Of course, it was very obvious to see. And despite KDB getting an assist and sort of growing into the game as it went on, he had a very average game, I think, by his standards. He only completed one key pass, and Fred was a big reason for this. And if you bear in mind that KDB is averaging 3.4 key passes per 90 this season in the Premier League, it's a really impressive feat to stop one of the Premier League's greats. Another unlikely player who played well against Man City that not many people were talking about was Wan-Bissaka, and he deserves some praise as well. And he's another reason why you could give Ten Hag some praise, because he's come in, and look, if he's got a future at Man United or not, that's a question for the comments. Man United fans, let me know how you're feeling about that one. Do you feel like he has got a place in this squad or side? Is it the same thing with Fred and McTominay as it is with Aaron Wan-Bissaka? Because he wasn't dribbled past a single time in this game. He made 4 tackles, and on top of that, he made 3 out of 3 successful dribbles. That's the one I really like. I thought he was really confident on the ball in difficult areas. In terms of him getting beaten, we know he's really strong defensively. And also what we see a lot of the time with Man City at the moment is players sort of going into traffic a little bit and not going at the fullback. So that made his life a little bit easier. But he had a great game defensively and a really good game offensively as well. And that first goal comes from him getting out of trouble a little bit. So massive respect to Aaron Wan-Bissaka, who had lost a lot of respect, as did many Man United players over the last 9-18 months, right? So answer this for me, guys. Does he have a future at Man United? I would really love to know. Right, now it's time for Manchester City to get their dusting down, because something's not bloody right. Something's not happening here. And as far as the average positions are concerned, Man City were their usual selves, apart from one very big aspect up top. Haaland's role was totally different to anything we've seen so far from him in a Man City shirt, and he often dropped deep, and I mean really deep, almost parallel with Rodri at times. And the thought process from Guardiola must have been to drag him away from being man-marked and to have that extra player in build-up, because Haaland usually stays out of that build-up play. Haaland made 14 passes against Man United, which is much, much higher than his season average, which is 10.9 per game. But in hindsight, it just didn't work, did it at all? And with Man United playing a double pivot in midfield, it was just really congested. And having Haaland as an extra presence, it didn't create any new passing lanes. The one thing I would say with it was that, yes, he dropped deep, and yes, he didn't always get the ball in those areas. I think they're so well drilled, Man City, that they went for other options. But what I would say is that when he did spin and make those runs in behind, yes, he wasn't in line with the centre-back, but the guys are trained. You've got to play those passes into those areas, and they didn't do that throughout the game. And what that happens when he's dropping deep, then you're not utilising him when you're going behind. But again, you're also not, it took away from an option that Man City had over the top in terms of, I think, the thought process of the players around him, even though that ball actually was on a lot more than those players thought, right? In the second half, he went back to his usual position, and he then had that little bit more joy, as did De Bruyne, by stretching the defence by having that player that does run in behind and to the back post as well. And there were a few moments. It does feel like they're a bit one-dimensional, Man City, at the moment, in terms of breaking down the opposition who know what they're doing a little bit. And it comes from that De Bruyne little chip to the back post. But Haaland wasn't able to get on the end of either of them. One was a goal from Grealish, but there was another chance as well where I think Bernardo Silva had a header that went over the bar. And so, again, that link up with De Bruyne and Haaland, it's still there, but they're struggling with it a little bit. And I'm annoyed because he was my triple captain in FPL this week. I think this is something that I'm sort of reflecting on a lot when it comes to the Premier League right now. The teams that have that player that can run in behind and stretch the play and sort of affect that back line of a defence, those are the teams that are really starting to hurt and have some real joy. And it's not a new thing. It's a really obvious thing. But I think what's interesting is that there are just so many of these players that want it to feat right now instead of affecting the game. And in this instance, Luke Shaw and Varane's jobs were pretty easy. The pair didn't make a single interception between them. And that stemmed from that lack of penetration on penetrative passes from Man City. The last bone to pick, I think, with Pep is the lack of substitutes that he made. He substituted Grealish on the 57th minute, and he had an instant impact, scoring the opening goal. But then he didn't make any more substitutes, despite having Alvarez and Gundogan on the bench. Gundogan would have been the ideal substitution for Bernardo Silva for that added presence in the box late on. And this is something that continues to happen with Guardiola. And it's something that, let's be honest, if things aren't working, you've got to change it. And when you've got that embarrassment of riches, you've got to use it, surely. And if they don't win this title, there's a few instances here where not playing those substitutes or not utilising them is hurting Man City right now. Everton 1, Southampton 2. Southampton fans, apologies. We will talk about you. But every time, and someone pointed this out to me, every time we all do it, we always go, Southampton are gone. And maybe they are gone, but they're putting up a bit of a fight. And I thought Nathan Jones made some really, really smart decisions in this game. 2-1, as I said, Southampton came back from a 1-0 down, 1.37 to 1.19. So Everton did have a little bit more XG. And the biggest worry yet for Everton comes after this game because of the games that they've lost now. They've now lost to both Wolves and Southampton at home, importantly, and it was that home form that got them out of trouble last time, and both of which were bottom of the table when Everton played them. This defeat felt like the worst one yet, with everything that's going on around the club, and I've done a video looking at how you could possibly fix things at Everton, so go check that out if you are an Everton fan. But with the Everton board asked not to be present at the match out of fear for their own safety, it was a really, really ugly situation for Everton, and is again, and it does feel like Groundhog Day a little bit. I bet the Everton fans wish they weren't there, to be honest, to witness what was a really horrible performance with a team that looked set up to be their best option, because the back five has been something that has been a useful tool for Everton this season defensively, but it leaves so much to be desired going forward. And combined, Mikalenko and Coleman registered one successful cross between the two of them. That's just not good enough for a team that has so many players behind the ball, and in particular, going to need some attacking output from those wing backs. And this meant that Everton's only hopes of creating something were forcing play to Demarai Gray, who did play well, in fairness to him, and delivered a good cross for Everton's goal. But Everton can't rely on Demarai Gray to sort of bail them out each week. It's just not enough. And with no real form or style to their attack and chance creation, it's just nothing really coming unless it's something that's off the cuff. There doesn't seem to be a clear approach going forward. Maybe that will change in the next few weeks, and it needs to, because it was tough viewing this game for Everton and, of course, Everton fans. On the flip side, well done, Southampton. Well done, Southampton, who had an absolutely fantastic week after everyone said they were completely done and dusted. Now, obviously, they're not out of trouble, but they had a clear method of attacking, which is something that Nathan Jones has been trying to sort of figure out over the last few weeks. And the idea was to sort of work the ball into forward areas as directly as they could, whilst, importantly, having James Ward-Prowse as high up as possible, utilising his quality, and it worked. His heat map shows how involved he was in advanced areas, importantly, and how he's evolving into a 10, which is really interesting and makes complete sense when you think he is such a good finisher, obviously from a dead ball, but generally is an incredible technician. And when you've got other players who might have that fear factor in terms of their finishing, if you think of the chances that Che Adams missed this season as the guy who's supposed to be their number one forward, to have your best player high up the pitch, it does give you a chance. And when he does get a chance, he's got that composure to take it. And it's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see him playing as this 10. And I think it's something that they should look to do as much as possible because, as I say, he's very, very integral to them. And when it comes to him creating and affecting the game, getting him high up the pitch is a great shout. And long may that continue because I think he's the kind of player that could give them a chance. Godfrey being sent for a hot dog for the first and a stupid foul from Anthony Gordon for the second set up James Ward-Prowse for what is essentially a penalty at this stage when he's this good at free kicks. And the only player who put in a performance worthy of staying up was Onana, to be honest. And he was dominant all over the pitch and showed his dominance in the box for his goal. Otherwise, it's only Gray who showed any quality at all. And it may be positive times for Southampton on the horizon, who have now got 3 wins. I think there is going to be an over-reliance on James Ward-Prowse. But Nathan Jones at least is thinking outside the box and trying something different. And they got their rewards in a hard-fought game that they deep down really, really needed to win. And they now have 3 wins on the bounce in all competitions, beating Palace, Man City and Everton. And they look like they have discovered the most effective way of attacking under Nathan Jones. And they have a clear plan in place for the first time in ages. So well done to the Saints. Wolves 1, West Ham 0, 0.88 XG to 1.08 in this pretty boring game, if I'm honest. And West Ham just cannot score right now. And it feels like, when it comes to Wolves, that Ruben Neves will save this team on his own at the moment. Under Lopetegui, Wolves have found a new identity to them, and I'm hugely impressed with the style of play that he's integrated so far. Looks like they're going to spend some money in this January transfer window to get them out of trouble. And with a 4-3-3, with those flying fullbacks and a narrow attack, it looks extremely balanced, and it offers a lot of counter-attacking opportunities. And Podence has found some really, really good form right now. If you think of those fullbacks of Bueno, who really was, wasn't he? And Semedo, they looked impressive. I don't think that's something we could have said about Semedo too often over the last year or so, essentially since he's been there. And against West Ham, they did well. Their high positions gave Wolves that width that they needed, but this was only possible because of that one man, Ruben Neves. You talk about Tottenham, and I spoke about it in my match reaction. If you don't have those centre midfielders who can get on the ball and allow the team to sort of stretch in terms of their formation, but also be press-proof, and you think about his passing range from that base of the midfield, it just allows Wolves to be that little bit more brave and trust that he's going to retain the ball even when they do leave their centre-backs exposed. And Neves had 103 touches against West Ham and maintained 87% pass completion despite attempting some outrageous passes, because he does love a long-range pass. That's why he's one of the crucial midfielders for them, and it allowed them to spread out that little bit and get higher up the pitch. And having him in the side, it just unlocks and allows them to play on the front foot and to target the space and get the ball up the pitch, essentially. And it was a brilliant performance, again, from him. Núñez was also excellent with his energy, and he was willing to get forward and give the midfield balance whilst also supporting the attack. And all in all, the tactical approach, it was really nicely balanced, and it works extremely well on the counter. As for West Ham, I think they lack one thing, and that is conviction at this moment in time. And despite creating 23.4 XG this season, they've only scored 15 goals. And that's not because they're not working hard or they're downing tools or anything like that. It's because they lack a cutting edge when they do get the chances. Benrahma and Scamacca both had chances in this game. These are players that people have been screaming for, but they snatched at those chances. And that could be down to the current predicament they find themselves in, but it almost seems like they're trying too hard and they're shooting themselves in the foot in the process. Having said that, I think if they did try and shoot themselves in the foot, they'd probably miss. It's a joke. Let it go, West Ham fans. You're going to be fine. I know you're in the relegation places, I know, and I know you're wary of what's happened in the past, but that might sort of trigger I mean, either trigger better performances and an ability to just get that one victory. Get that one victory, and I think you'll be fine. You're going to be mid-table. You're going to be a little bit disappointed with the season as a whole. But I think a knee-jerk reaction from the West Ham bosses would be a shame, in my opinion. I know it's easy for me to keep calm, and I get it, West Ham fans. You're frustrated. It's not clicking, and the expectations were higher. But, do you know what I mean? 6 months ago, whatever it was, 7 months ago, you're in a Europa League semi-final. Don't give up on David Moyes just yet. I get it's a little bit blunt going forward, and maybe he needs to find a few more answers. But I don't think sacking him is the answer personally. Just yet. Stick or twist, West Ham fans, let me know how you're feeling in the comments down below. Is enough enough? Does he need to go? And if he does go, who do you want to bring in? And last, but certainly not least, Brighton 3, Liverpool 0, 1.94 to 1.05 when it comes to the XG. Is it time to finally blame Klopp? Because before we go in on Liverpool, we just have to give immense credit to Brighton and De Zerbi. And I think the thing to say is I'm not surprised. And that's nothing at Liverpool at all. Liverpool are in a difficult moment, as they say. And we'll get into that. But this is the Brighton team and club that is just, honestly, they're inspirational. And I think aspirational for every other team, I think, in English football outside the guys that can just throw cash at it. They're so good. And the players develop. And they're better than some of their parts. They're confident. They're attacking. They're optimistic. They're positive. And when they beat Everton, I was not surprised. And when they beat Liverpool and it was 3-0, I was not surprised. Brighton and De Zerbi, they're a really lovely match here. And again, smart decisions from the club. And the way that De Zerbi wants his side to play, it's being firmly imprinted in the players' minds. And it's no fluke that they did what they did to Liverpool. Wingers are the big key to this system. And during De Zerbi's last season in charge at Sassuolo, the wingers were the main goal threat in his side. You had right winger Domenico Berardi. He scored 17 and assisted 7 in Serie A that season. And now we're seeing De Zerbi do the exact same with Solly March, who was unplayable for 2 reasons against Liverpool. So let's talk about this wing play. It was wing play all day for Brighton because March's finishing and end product was brilliant on the day, but it was no fluke because he ended up in these positions, starting wide and moving inside from the right. It was something that Liverpool had no answers for throughout the match. No one picked him up and allowed him to sneak in behind or inside several times. Mitoma on the other side was used really, really intelligently. He was manipulating space and then moving inside to punish Liverpool, something that I know other teams have done as well, but to have it on both sides was really, really interesting. You got Mitoma, number 29, and March, number 27. They had the most and second most touches in the final third for Brighton, and importantly, they were meaningful touches. They also received the most and second most progressive passes, with Mitoma receiving 10 and March receiving 8. This was no fluke, as I've said. The passing networks clearly display just how clear a focus Brighton had. And it was great to see. And it was very, very dominant. And Liverpool's problems, I mean, where do we start? Let's go with the passing networks. It's probably a good place to start to sort of visualise what's going wrong. And early on in the game, we saw Salah having a little bit of success receiving the ball high up in the field. But then he didn't get fresh balls played in behind, and gradually Liverpool came deeper and deeper, and Brighton were able to gain more and more control, and this was a huge problem against Brighton. But it's also been a huge problem this season. Last year, Salah received 10.2 progressive passes per 90, but against Brighton, he only received 7. His average for this season is also down, 7.57, and this means he's receiving less forward balls, which is leading to him to get less chances as well, and he's having to drop deeper to get involved in the play and get on the ball as he tries to make something happen. The second problem for Liverpool in this game, but also the season, I think, as a whole, is how deep the midfield are sitting. I think this is the biggest one. And actually, this was kind of put in my mind from Chris Pajak. Chris on Redmen TV did an amazing video. I really, really enjoyed watching it. And he was looking at the difference between how Liverpool used to play when they had Wijnaldum in the team alongside with Henderson, and now with Thiago that little bit deeper, and the forward players that are that little bit, well, very, very different to Mane, Salah and Firmino back in the day. So go check that video out. But with all 3 of the midfielders being deep, there's just less links to the forward, but it also takes away from the press. Because if you take away from the press, that means it's easier to make your way through. And if you make your way through, then you're nearer their goal. And if you're nearer their goal, it puts more pressure on Liverpool's back line. And that's something that when they were at their best, that wasn't happening as much because they were keeping the opposition in their third. We can see that McAllister was able to take up this space against them and influence the game with his play to Matoma and Estupiñán. McAllister made 5 passes into the final third against Liverpool and was able to orchestrate because he was unchallenged mainly. So as much as it's about tiredness and maybe a sort of mental fragility through being jaded and everything that happened last year, it's also a structural thing. And that's on Klopp a little bit, as well as some injuries. I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that the problems have been there all season for Liverpool in the Brighton match. It should be the biggest red flag for change yet. And after the game, Klopp went to the Liverpool end with his hands up in apologies. Some of the players, such as Trent Alexander-Arnold, didn't even bother though and headed straight down the tunnel. And it's a bit of a juxtaposition to where they were when Klopp joined and where they would all go as a team towards the fans, hand in hand, and give them that embrace after every match. And that's just because the results aren't the same, and it's tough. It's so hard to keep that togetherness. I've just done the football fill-in with Ben Foster. I've got a video and I'm going to talk to him about players downing tools. And I'm not saying Liverpool are doing that for a second. But what he did say, which was really interesting, was that, when it's not going your way, people are pissed off because they are human. And that's probably an element that's hurting Liverpool a little bit as well. That sort of burden of expectation because of what they know they can do is really, really hurting them right now. Another big derby win for a team in red. Nottingham Forest 2, Leicester City 0, XG of 2.36. Go on, Forest. To 1.02 for Leicester. Foxes lost in the Forest ground. Forest continue to be quality at home, despite only scoring 2 goals away all season. I did say it last episode of the Fallout. It's going to be that home form that gets them over the line. And again, we also said last time around 4-3-1-2. That's the formation that Steve Cooper has developed, and it's working brilliantly. And it packs a punch as well because Morgan Gibbs-White and Brennan Johnson are looking really, really tasty together. They were unstoppable against Leicester, and most importantly, actually, clinical. With Morgan Gibbs-White playing as advanced as possible, you truly get the best out of him, and he's repaying that transfer fee that they paid for him and then some when he plays like he did against Leicester City. He's really starting to find his feet, and it's one where it's so exciting, isn't it? Because he is still so young, so there's a long, long way to go and a lot of development still to come from Morgan Gibbs-White. He also just has a really nice relationship with Brennan Johnson. Sometimes you see that, don't you, in teams? You can see that they're mates, and it feels like that when you watch these two play together. There is a sort of simpatico. Is that the word? Maybe not. We'll leave it in though. They seem to know where each other are. They're in sync, is what I'm trying to say. They always know where each other are, they're loving each other's movement patterns, and they want to give the ball to each other. And this brings us on to Johnson quite well, obviously, because he scored the goals. And despite only having 4 goals in the league this season, he's far better than the statistics suggest. I think he's a really, really strong player, and probably why he's one of the few of the Championship players that have been able to, one, stick around because they're not loan signings, but secondly, who are good enough to play in the Premier League. And he took both of his goals absolutely excellently, which any Championship fans will tell you that's what he's got in his locker. He is a really good finisher, and by starting on the right wing but also making central runs, which is something we've been asking for on the Fallout, it made him really, really hard to track for Leicester, who had their fullbacks in those advanced positions, which has been their downfall at different times, with Castagna in particular hurting the team when he does go forward, them not having that insurance behind. His pace also makes it really hard to catch him once he's got past you as well, which is a great asset for Steve Cooper to have. Another aspect of the Forest attack that I enjoyed was that there wasn't sort of a single dimension to them in terms of it being Morgan Gibbs-White and Johnson. You had other people contributing as well. Ryan Yates would often make third-man runs into the box when Forest had the ball out wide. That's a big part of his game and the energy that he can bring. It gave them more presence in the box as well, which can actually just provide goals without it being an assist for him, but because you're creating a little bit of chaos and someone else for someone to focus on. And their fullbacks also held out really well and got forward on occasion as well. In particular, Serge Aurier, who's been an absolute revelation actually at Nottingham Forest. He's a player that sometimes people kind of laugh at from his time at Tottenham, but he's doing really, really great stuff there at Nottingham Forest. When it comes to Leicester, I think the biggest problem is that they don't win unless they play well, if that makes sense, And the World Cup has really killed them a little bit. It feels like everything has to go their way if they are to come away with a victory. And that lack of creativity and goals that James Maddison offers, and we saw it with Harvey Barnes and some of the chances that he missed in this game. Harvey Barnes, as exciting as he is, he just isn't a complete finisher in my eyes, and James Maddison has been so clutch for them this year that they're really, really missing him. Leicester City apparently got a bit of interest in Nico Gonzalez from Fiorentina, and it makes sense, to be honest, because Harvey Barnes and Mark Goldbridge on the wings, it simply isn't enough, especially without Maddison in the team. But Fiorentina have given Leicester a hands-off warning. Back up. What's hands-off in Italian? That. So they might go through the window, another window, without buying that winger that they desperately need, and we seem to let them know every single time we do a video. But they don't watch today. They don't watch. Do we want, Leicester? So there you have it. If you don't want to miss out tomorrow's episode of The Fallout, make sure you subscribe. If you enjoyed this one, hit the like button. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see you next time.